Crime, Corrections, and Culture is here in our Monday edition. I believe this is actually our 15th episode. So we're moving right along. We're getting through Inside the Criminal Mind by Dr. Stanton Samenow. When we're done covering this book, we're going to cover others. I anticipate we'll be having guests. We've already had one on a special episode. So keep tuning in where you're going to hear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. No hyperbole, no exaggeration, no sensationalism about the correctional system. And please remember, super chats and super stickers are very much appreciated. And with that, I will turn it over to my co-host, Persephone.
So, the next episode, we're on chapter 9 already of this book. So the next chapter is about drugs, and it's called Criminality is Primary and Drugs are Secondary.
Okay.
And the whole gist of this chapter is that the accepted narrative that drugs are what causes someone to commit crimes, or that people turn to drugs because of poverty and then that makes them commit crimes. Samenow says that the criminal personality comes first, and the drugs are not causing criminal behavior. The criminal behavior is causing the drugs a lot of the time. You use drugs.
Well,
You
thanks
wanna
for
talk
pointing
about-
that out.
Well, I mean, it's not something that you haven't spoken about before.
Yeah,
so
I
was just
was
reiterating.
I was well enmeshed in criminal behavior before I ever took any drugs at all. So I want you got to think in terms. Now I've talked about the criminal thinking errors, and you're talking about the criminal who has deep fears, insecurities. I mean, a lot of contradictions going on because the criminal also sees himself as all powerful. It kind of depends on the moment. So I started using drugs when I was 15. I started smoking weed. That's when I started drinking too. And I learned that the drinking gave me courage I didn't otherwise have. So it gave me courage to fight. I was afraid to fight. It gave me courage to commit some crimes I wouldn't commit had I been sober. It gave me courage to talk to girls. It gave, I don't know. So a teenager having sex tends to be over pretty quickly, right? So the liquor helped with that. So I engaged in liquor to talk to girls, to improve my sexual performance, to give me courage to fight, to give me courage to commit crimes. And the people that I know that are criminals, it's the same story, is that the criminal thinking precedes the drug use. So that is correct.
Yeah, so I mean, that was one of my questions. Like, first of all, like, when did you start doing drugs? At 15. And was the criminal thinking already fully formed? And you've said yes.
Yeah.
There was one guy whose name was also Michael who said that he used drugs to escape. And then when he was
Sure.
asked to escape from what, he was like, oh, nothing really. I guess my life was pretty good just to escape the boredom. Paying bills sucked and was mind numbing, so he started using
Why
drugs.
was he paying bulls? And how do you even pay a bull?
Bills. Paying bills. How do you
Okay.
say bills?
Bills, like you just said it, bills. So yeah,
Bills.
you want to. It's escape from what? Escape from reality. Escape from me. Escape from everything that is. Escape from the tedium that is everyday existence. Escape from the insecurities. Escape from fear. I mean, there's an abundance of psychological psychological phenomena that people want to escape from, and criminals, they do it to give them courage to commit crimes, among other things. Yeah, the idea that it's the drugs that cause criminality. Now, I'm not saying there's no circumstances where somebody gets strung out on drugs and ends up committing crimes they wouldn't actually have committed earlier. or that they commit, they weren't even committing crime and now they do. What I'm saying is that the criminal thinking in most circumstances precedes the drug use. But, there's also studies that show that the criminal activity gets worse post drug use.
Why did you start doing drugs? Can you remember? I
I
know a
remember
lot
the
of
first
people
time
can't.
the first time I smoked weed, and I think that Danny will appreciate this. I was in my old neighborhood, the projects. I was in Ben's backyard, um, and there were dudes over there that were smoking pot. Prior to that, I had basically been against using drugs, and I just decided to do it. I don't know why. And once I did it once, I wanted to do it more. And once I started smoking the weed, I said, well, why not drink the booze? And then I was off and running.
Do you remember why you started doing harder drugs?
Yeah, that's easy because I wanted a different experience. I wanted a better experience. So I didn't, you gotta, so I tried LSD a few times. My mother introduced me to, benzodiazepines. So you're talking about Xanax, Valium, Ativan. That was when I was a teenager. And I thought, well, that you can mix this with the weed and with the booze. So I did that, and that was all interesting. But it was all to try something different. People came around with Coke, so I tried that, and yeah, I don't know. The Coke made me feel strong, but I wasn't really a big Coke person because it made my heart beat quick and made me paranoid, and I didn't really like that. Plus, I was scared to become addicted to it.
But you did heroin
Much later, much later. I mean,
after you were no longer concerned about being
well,
addicted.
well, no. So I didn't. We're getting a little off topic, but the heroin. Actually, I was 20 when I first did it. Now, I know 17, 18 to 20 is not very much time. When you're 17 years old to 20, it seems like it's forever. So I did heroin. I had no idea how quickly the physical dependence took. 3 days and that your body needs it. I had no idea of that. Once I became physically dependent on it, I got off of it. I got on methadone and detoxed off of it. And I don't think I ever would have done it again. But then I went to prison, and I'm like, what the hell do I care? I'm in prison. What difference does it make?
So he also says that he talks about the drugs, and it's tied into like the desire for excitement,
Right.
which is one of the
Right. So,
driving forces behind a lot of criminal
okay.
behavior.
So I'm 15, and I started using drugs. But so now you have to find connections where you can get the drugs. That's exciting. We were going to dangerous neighborhoods, so that was a bit exciting. We got to the point where we would do rip-offs. You drive up, they come over, they put the weed in the car, and you take off. So that was exciting. The whole life was exciting. It was making the calls about trying to go where we're going to go get the weed, finally going out, and then you go get it. And then there was we're ripping people off, not just the drug dealers, but other people. So that was exciting. One of the most, the height of absurdity occurred one time. We went to, very bad neighborhood, and the plan was to rip off the drug dealer. We pull up and they come over, they throw the weed in the car, and we would drive off. So I actually got one guy. He was so mad, he just gave me weed for free. That because I was trying to rip him off. He said, "Look, you want to smoke for free here, you know." But anyway, so we go another time and we pull up, and this guy comes over to the car, and I snatch his weed, and the driver hits the gas. The dude grabs onto me to try to pull me out of the car while the car is moving. He's very angry that we ripped him off. We get up the street. We're so excited. We get to smoke the weed. I open the bag and it was full of grass. He was trying to rip us off. So,
You know what I find really interesting about this?
but hold on one second. The point is that it was all very exciting. Yes.
Yeah. So that's sort of what he says, right? In the book, he talks about how it's not just the actual doing drugs. It's like you get excited about the going and getting the drugs, and you're thinking about doing drugs, and you're planning the doing the drugs.
Yeah.
And what I find really funny, you talk about it, because to me that sounds unbelievable. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound true, because I did drugs for a large part of my youth and into my early 20s, and I never thought like that. And I did hard drugs, and I was never excited about going into dangerous areas. I wanted to be as safe as possible. I didn't think about doing drugs. I didn't plan doing drugs. So to me, it's really funny for you to unprompted sort of just talk about what he was talking about and say, this is what it was like for me. When
Right.
for me, who clearly isn't a criminal, it was exactly the opposite. And I just find it really fascinating.
Yeah, we thought it was cool to go to bad neighborhoods. I mean, I've got so many stories that are could be taken both terrifying and hilarious.
Probably more terrifying.
Well, yeah, I guess, but there was still, there was a lot of funny, just ridiculous stories. But yeah, it was a whole thing. You're trying to get a ride. You're trying to then you got to go to the neighborhood. You got to get the we used to have you got to go buy the blunt. You got to roll the blunt. It was all very very exciting for us.
Yeah,
And
no.
once I realized that I could rip people off like that, people with money, they want drugs or people selling drugs. You can go rob them. It became, that became part of the deal too.
No, can't relate. I like I really can't relate to any of that. Um so he talks about like if 10 men get drunk, not all of them are going to go out and kill and rob and rape. Um did you ever feel like drugs were making you do things that you wouldn't otherwise have done?
Never, never, not even once. No,
Really?
really.
So I mean that sort of ties into like
Well, hold
the
on. Let me clarify.
hmm.
It gave me the courage to do things that I wouldn't have otherwise done. Yes, but I did the stuff because I wanted to do those things.
But you never so you come back to the criminal thinking that he's a good person,
Hmm.
right? And the criminal thinking that he's a victim.
Hmm.
So drugs can give them can serve both purposes, right? I'm a good person, but it's just the drugs that are making me do this, and it's not my fault that I'm doing these things because I'm an addict and it's not my fault, right?
Right.
So did you ever feel like that?
No. I actually never used the drugs as the excuse. No, no, that wasn't my thing. I blamed my upbringing, um, but it's probable that I was so repulsed by my parents using the drugs as an excuse that might be why. I remember when I first came across the idea, I went to visit my father. He was in a rehab, and they were talking about how addiction's a disease. And I remember just thinking, that's such a bullshit. It's such an excuse. Like that's all they're doing is using this as an excuse to justify their poor behavior. So I was probably in some ways immunized against taking that path. But I've certainly come across many, many, many people who blame drugs, in various groups in prison, blaming drugs for why they were criminals. And upon a little interrogation, you found out they were criminals long before they ever did their first drugs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It kind of makes sense because again, I don't have the same criminal personality, and again, I did plenty of drugs and plenty of hard drugs, and I never felt the urge to steal from people or beat people, anything like that. So it's not drugs that makes you do it. It's
No. So I had a friend one time call me up, and he says, "Hey, how would you like to make $50 tonight?" I said, "Yeah, sure. What do I got to do?" He said, "Well, there's this dude that we wants to buy. I forgot what it was, and all you got to do is rob the guy, and you'll get $50 out of the deal." I said, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And he told me that they were considering asking these other group of kids from town, but they decided to ask me. So I told my friend, I'm like, "You see, that's the problem." I said, "Those guys are not criminals. They wouldn't pull it off." I said, "We are criminals. We'll pull this off." So we went. Daniel doesn't know what he's talking about. I rob people just for kicks. But anyway, so we do the robbery, and we get the money. And the kid I was with was totally freaking out. And he says, "Remember how you said that we're criminals?" He said, "But I'm not." And it wasn't in his wheelhouse. It was in mine. And an interesting thing occurred that day because Danny knows all these people. The whole thing was set up by a certain redheaded friend of ours, Danny, that you know. And he didn't go, but me and another kid went. So when we got the money, it was like $1,300. And once I saw the $1,300, I said, "Why the hell am I only accepting 50?" So not only now did I rob the kid that was trying to buy the drugs, now I talked the guy with me into he and I splitting the money and robbing the redhead. So we totally cut the redhead, the guy who set the deal up. We ditched him out of the equation. And that's just, what it is. There's no honor among thieves, as they say, right? So it started off, I wanted a little excitement in $50. Got that, but then that wasn't enough. So now I'm ripping off somebody that I'd known since I was a little kid, and talking this other guy that I'm with into doing the same thing.
But also, there's like a strange pride in like, well, they're not criminals, but we are.
Yeah, it
We're
was
we're
sick.
the
Yeah,
ones who can pull this off. Like,
yeah.
we'll do it because we're hard, which is, interesting. Um, he also talks about people who become clean specifically to become better criminals because they realize that the drugs are fucking up their ability to commit crimes.
That can happen. It didn't happen to me, but
No,
it doesn't surprise me.
Oh, there was another guy who said that he would be a fairly decent person if it wasn't for the drugs. And Samenow tells him, "But you're not. You wouldn't be."
No, it's bullshit. And you choose to take the drugs. That's the key. It's interesting because my mind is kind of going here. So I'll just give you an example as kids, something that we used to do. We used to do something, we called them tasks. What a task was, essentially, we lived in the projects, but the projects were connected to good neighborhoods. We would hop fences and just run through these people's yards just to see if we could get away with it. We especially would go in this one guy. This guy was rumored, and I don't know if it was true or not, but the guy was rumored to have a shotgun with rock salt and that he would shoot kids. So we made it a point to go through his backyard just for the challenge to see if this would actually occur.
Did you do this?
All the time. Like every night we did it. There were different ones. There was the big fence task. There was the Brimfield task. There was the Bush task. And it all entailed going into the good neighborhoods and going through their private property. One night we actually, I think, no, Danny's brother wasn't involved. So, but anyway, so we slept out one night in the yards, and we decided we were going to go terrorize the neighborhood. So we're banging on street signs, and this is the middle of the night. We're spray painting houses, spray painting cars, throwing things at houses. The cops just did not come. So finally, one of the kids I was with that was committing these atrocities with us, just to be able to run from the cops, he goes in and calls the cops on us. Just so we could get the rush of running from the police.
So, in previous episodes, a little while ago, we were talking about reputation, right? And in more than once, you've said that you were a coward.
Yeah.
And then when I asked you about something that Samenow talks about, he talks about kids sort of injuring themselves or doing really dangerous stuff in order to, like, you know, make themselves seem hard.
Yeah.
You immediately said you didn't do stuff like that. You don't remember doing stuff like that. But now you're talking about running through a yard where there's like a chance that you could get shot with a shotgun full of rock salt.
Yeah.
And this was something that you just did.
Well, I figured we would get away with it. There's a big difference between deliberately jabbing myself with something where I'm going to get hurt knowingly and something that I think I'm going to get away with. I ultimately thought that we would get away with running through these yards, and we did because nobody ever got in trouble for it.
I can't wrap my mind around this, because if I thought that there was a chance that someone was going to, the slimmest chance that someone was going to shoot at me with rock salt, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Look, I'm not saying I was the brightest or most consistent kid. I'm just telling you what happened.
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that. So
what is XP?
Experience points. In video games, when you do side quests, you get XP. Megan is outing herself as a huge nerd. Same, Megan. So he talks about Alcoholics Anonymous as well, and he says that sobriety from, I guess, alcohol or drugs doesn't actually address the underlying issue, because you can be a dry drunk. You know,
well,
you're still dishonest.
If it did, right, then all the people that go to jail who claim that they're drug addicts and the drug addiction has caused them to commit crime would end up being in prison and be law-abiding. But they're not. They exhibit the same patterns of behavior without any of the drugs.
Yeah, but I mean, you also get criminals. What is it? Non-arrestable
offenses.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the same thing. So another thing that he talks about is Thomas, and Thomas, after 6 months of abstinence, said, "Where's my reward?" Right? Because he thought that if he gave up the drugs, if he stopped doing drugs, his life would be, he would have no more problems.
Well, there's also the sense that just because I do what I'm supposed to be doing, what everybody does, I should be given a reward for it. Right? Like, everybody does this. People are responsible. Not everybody, but most people are responsible. They don't do what you do. But now you're going to join the responsible world and you want super brownie points for it.
Yeah, but again, like, you're so unique. You're unique among the world, but you're also entitled. So you're entitled to rewards, and you're special. Therefore, you should be able to do these things, and that other people aren't allowed to do, and you should get rewards that other people don't get. But I mean, did you ever feel like that? I'm sure the answer is no. But I mean, you never thought, like, if I get off the drugs, you didn't blame the drugs in the first place.
No, so no. Yeah, you're right. No, I don't think so.
Was it easy to get drugs in prison?
Yeah.
Would you like to elaborate?
I did, but I had an extra long problem here. Missed the hair, and I had to get it out. Yeah. I mean, I could get them through visits. You could get them from somebody else that gets them through visits. The staff brings them in. Like, during COVID, if my memory serves me correct, and I think it does, COVID, when visits were completely off, no contact with the outside world, dirty urines went up.
How?
because the cops are bringing in the dope.
Okay, so Megan Ribbons has a question. I have a hard out in 5 minutes. But
All
Megan
right.
has a question. As a thrill seeker, what gave you the biggest rush?
You really want to know?
I'm assuming she does. But even if she doesn't, I would like to
Shooting
know.
at people. I don't know. What do you want from me? That's the answer.
Did that I know what the answer to this question is, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Did that not make you feel bad?
No.
Like the first,
No,
like
the
first
moment, the moment I got my first gun, I felt invincible. Like that, I felt nobody is fucking with me. And that's it. I didn't care what neighborhood I was in. I don't care who was around.
Why? Why did you?
I felt invincible.
The first time that you shot at someone, do you remember?
Yeah.
Elaborate. Tell the story.
Okay. All right. So I was with my friend, and a girl was driving the car. And we were going to one neighborhood to buy weed, and they didn't have any. So the idea, we said, okay, we got to go to the more dangerous neighborhood where they're known for ripping people off. So the object came up and said, well, what if they rip us off? And I ran my mouth. I said, if somebody rips me off, I'll shoot them. That'll be it. I didn't actually anticipate being ripped off. I was just shooting my mouth off, right? And so we went up there, and sure enough, they ripped us off. Now, I had been running my mouth for 10 minutes about how if they rip me off, I'm going to shoot them. Everybody in the car knew I had a gun on me. So I felt like I'm trapped. What am I supposed to do? So I did shoot at the guy. I don't know if I hit him or not. Wasn't much of a gun anyway. I mean, it was a 25 pea shooter. And anyways, that's neither here nor there. So afterwards, I'm kind of freaking out. The girl in the car was very excited about this because this was her first drive-by. My friend, Kenny, that I was with, he was envious because he didn't do the shooting. He was kind of jealous. They ended up dropping me off at home, and I felt very nervous about the whole situation. I went home and I watched the movie Basketball Diaries. Good movie. Anyways, once that nervous feeling went away, like I was, this is wonderful. I will, anybody crosses me at any time, if I can get away with it, I'm shooting at them.
It's funny that you phrase it like that. Well, I was trapped. I had no choice.
That's
I had
how
no
I
choice.
felt.
I mean,
But that's how I
you
felt. Of
yeah.
course I had a choice. I'm telling you how I felt, not the
No,
reality.
I know, but it's interesting because so Akira says you don't want to look like a coward to your homies. Yeah, you've got a reputation to maintain. So Megan Ribbon says, did you ever shoot at clays? I mean, what is the challenge of hitting a moving target? I don't think that the adrenaline rush really comes from the shooting a moving target, rather the threat of stop picking at your beard. The threat of potentially hitting a person and causing damage and being badass and being hard.
That is exactly it. I once shot at one of the most dangerous gangs in Hartford, and the next day called one of them up and told them it was me, and then went to his place of residence because I wanted him to understand.
Do you know these behaviors do not line up with someone who calls themselves a coward, who says that they were cowardly? Like it doesn't align. Because if you're a coward,
Okay, let me say what I mean by coward. Let me say, I was afraid to fight. I didn't want to fight somebody. I was afraid to get beat up. You put a gun in my hand, I'm not a coward. I'm not afraid.
Yeah, but I mean, I know plenty of people who have had guns and who have then themselves been shot.
Yeah, but you're the
Super
problem here,
optimism.
Persephone, is
It's not going to happen
right.
to you.
You're trying to make sense out of something that you can't. This is ridiculous behavior. I feel like I'm all powerful. You give me a gun, I feel like I'm all powerful. Of course, somebody else can shoot me,
But
and then
but
I'm
they but
done.
they but they wouldn't, because why would anybody shoot at you? Because
Well, in this specific instance, I was very confident because the gang member that we're talking about was a good friend, was the boyfriend of a good friend of mine, and this boyfriend had ripped me off with some other kids. I didn't let him know that I knew he was behind it. I told him I just thought it was the other ones, and that's why I went and shot at him. I also wanted him to understand what I was capable of. You understand? He could have just as easily went and told them, and I would have been dead. He didn't, for whatever reason. Maybe because of the girl. Maybe because he just didn't give a damn, and we went out and smoked weed together, and that's all he really cared about. I don't know.
so um Danny says, remember that we were bullied. Once people know not to fuck with you, it feels good. Was
That's
that
true.
also part of it?
Of course. I
And
wanted to I wanted to be feared. I was small. The older kids bullied me. That left an indelible mark on me, and the way that I compensated was through extreme violence.
so Megan Ribbon says, I guess I'm just not getting it. And it's probably good that you don't get it, because it
You're
means that
talking. Okay, let me see if I can't make this understandable to everybody. Megan, your highest value is your daughter, right? You'll do anything for your daughter, I'm imagining. My highest value was being feared. So imagine if you took the value and the love that you have for your daughter, and imagine if you wanted to be feared just as much as you wanted to protect your daughter, what you would do to get it. That's the best way I can explain it. It's just a completely skewed value system.
it is. It is. Um, so I mean, I really do have to go, but so Samenow also says that even if they,
You keep saying you have a heart out, and then
well,
you're
I
back.
do, I really do have to go, but I have like just like a few more questions.
All right.
Two, really. So he says, it's not even questions, it's just things that I made note of that I do want to discuss. So he says that even if there was a vaccine that blocked drugs from like interacting with the brain and stopped people from, being able to do this, then that wouldn't actually change anything, because all of the things that led the person to doing drugs in the first place would still be there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think that yeah, it's true. I'm a criminal. Look, I was committing crimes. I was doing things I should not have been doing before I ever decided to use drugs. Right? I set Danny, the kid in the thing, to fight a kid from the neighborhood. I used to do that frequently with younger kids, have them fight each other. I was twisted. What I mean, I don't know like how else to explain it. We've given out we've gone through well, I did anyway, the criminal thinking errors. You've posted them. We've talked about the criminal thinking errors when we did Down the Rabbit Hole. We're talking about a book called Inside the Criminal Mind. I'm opening up my mind to you and telling you about it, and you're still saying, well, I don't get it.
Well,
I don't know. No, it's not. It's not a. It's not. I'm not saying it's a shortcoming on your part. I'm saying that it's not an easy thing to grasp because it's so antithetical to the way that you
it's
think.
it's really not. Again, also because like again, I'm reading this whole chapter about drugs, and again, I did drugs, hard drugs, for a long time, and I never experienced any of this. Was never excited, never like when I was on drugs was like, I'm so excited to go and commit crimes. Like, I went about getting my drugs and doing my drugs as legally and safely and like as rationally as possible. So to me, it doesn't make any sense.
It does
Um,
not.
no, it doesn't. So the last question is, at the end, he talks about how the people who get sober, what they miss or what they say they miss isn't necessarily the drugs, but like the lifestyle around it. And you said like you were excited about going and getting drugs and ripping people off. Like, did you? What was getting clean like for you when you just? I mean, you were in prison when you.
Well, the problem is I decided to change my life. I didn't say I need to stop doing drugs and continue being a crook. I said I need to stop being a crook. So it's part of the same decision.
So when you decided to stop doing drugs, it wasn't. How do I phrase this question?
I don't know.
So deciding not to do drugs wasn't a separate decision for you. You were like,
No.
you weren't like, I'm going to stop doing drugs. You were like, I'm going to become a different person. Was
Yes.
stopping drugs easier because of that? Not that you would know.
I don't know. I can't explain it to you. I just knew I was done. Like I made the decision, and I decided before, oh, I'm not going to do any drugs anymore. I'm going to do it. It's like when you really decide to start a workout program. Everybody knows what it's like to say, I'm going to start working out, and you do it, and then you quit. And if you've ever actually stood with it, you know that when you've made that decision to actually do it, and that's it, it's a totally different thing. And when I made that decision that I'm just done with this way of living, it was unequivocal. So I don't know. I mean, there were always struggles, but not in the sense of where I was like, oh, screw this, I'm going to go back to that. Never. That never happened. Once I made the decision, no, that was
there,
it.
like, after you decided to change your life and get clean, was there anything about the whole drug lifestyle that you missed?
No. Nope.
Not at all. Never.
Mm-mm.
Not once.
Nope. I missed sometimes getting high because getting high feels good, but
Yeah,
the
but
whole
I mean,
lifestyle, no.
that's not
No.
really the thing. Like, obviously, I mean, again, you did.
The hardest thing for me to quit through all of this, and the one thing that's always bothered me, first of all, anger. Secondly, when people understood that I wasn't going to hurt them, how they would treat me sometimes, that was the hardest thing, to let that shit go. Because when somebody is talking nonsense to you, or somebody's belittling you, or not showing respect for you, and I know how to stop that really, really quick. You know what I mean? And I probably wouldn't have felt very guilty about it. To not act out in those moments, that was the hardest thing.
I mean, you still feel like that sometimes. Like, do you feel?
If somebody talks to me like in a threatening way,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it still comes up. It's like, dude, like you're only talking to me that way because you know. But part of me, when that happens, feels redeemed because I know that if I would, like, the people say things about my past and talk about that, but I know if they really believed I was still that person, they would never talk that way.
No.
Do you understand? So I know that when you're on the radio running your mouth about me, or you're on social media running your mouth about me, calling me names, bringing up my past, whatever, I know that that person deep down understands. Because I know that when I was that way, people didn't talk to me like that.
Ian, I do understand a hard out, and I do actually really have to go, but what can I say? It's interesting, and I had things to say, but now I really do have to go.
Thank you, Persephone. It has been a great episode, a great conversation. Really appreciate it. And I hope to see everybody on the Capitalist Corner tomorrow, 12 noon Eastern Time. We'll be back here Wednesday, 3:15 Eastern Time. Right? Everybody, have a good night.
Bye.